Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War News Update, second part of the 6th of June 2024. This is the military aid and equipment video. Before I start, I want to remind you, and remind myself, I need to get my talk together actually. I'm going to give a talk on the 15th of June, I think that's a Saturday, in the Andover area, that's North Hampshire. So if you're anywhere in that southy part of the UK, and you fancy coming along to hear me blather on about what I normally talk about, but obviously with great enthusiasm and insightful precision and wit, and certainly an awful lot of good looks and charm, please check out the email address below. It would be really great to see you. It's only a very sort of local area. They'd like a few more people to pop along, so we need to drum up a bit of support for that, and it's all for a great cause of raising money for drones to Ukraine through them. So there's an email address below. Please check that out. Shoot off an email yourself to find out the details and grab a ticket and pop along. It'd be great to see you and make yourself known as a viewer of the channel, and join in the conversation. We'll be talking about whether we are indeed in World War III. Right, we're going to start by going to France, or not literally, to talk about how they are going to provide $700 million worth in critical infrastructure support to Ukraine. They will focus on projects related to transportation and energy, both having been hit hard by the Russians this year, particularly energy. So it's good news from France. The Democrats in Congress in the US are calling on the removal of any restrictions on the use of American weapons by Ukraine. Quote, "I hope the restriction will be lifted. I support the bipartisan letter sent by our intelligence committee on this very issue, and we are seeing Ukraine begin to make better use of these weapons, especially in Crimea." Or I'd say especially in, actually, Belgorod, because in Crimea they were already able to use those weapons, really. So although that the ATACMS are being used in Crimea, but that isn't a case. Well, it wasn't so much a case of changing a restriction, it was changing of weaponry, but I suppose you could say that weapon was previously restricted from being sent to Ukraine. Anyway, whatever. Point is, Democrats seem to be getting on board with changing restrictions, and possibly even more importantly, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who was integral in not getting aid to Ukraine quickly enough. In fact, it was broadly his fault that aid didn't go for 7 months, but he's now come out and he seems to be increasingly in support of Ukraine. I think he knows the reality of what's going on there and the implications on US strategy and position in the world going forward. But he said, quote, "The US should not put a stick in Ukraine's wheels and decide how they use weapons. I do not support Biden's decision on various restrictions," Mike Johnson. I think this is great, actually, from a Republican point of view. So given I'm only going to talk about what's good for Ukraine, right? So if you're saying, right, I'm a Republican or I'm an advisor that really wants support to Ukraine, I would advise the Republicans going hard on Biden and blaming Biden or blaming the administration and Jake Sullivan as not being hard enough. I've said quite a number of times that instead of going this side of where the Biden administration is about campaigning not to give weapons to Ukraine, because your supporters will go with you. So especially if you're Trump, where you've got a very cultish support, wherever you go, you will take everyone with you. When Trump joked about being able to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they still vote for him, is broadly correct there, right? So no matter what you say, people will go with you. So instead of going to the pro-Russian side of supporting Ukraine, go the other side of Biden and jump to this side and say, you're not being harsh enough. You're not giving enough weapons. I really think they could have gone like hard Reagan on the whole situation and come out with a bit of a vote winner that would have attracted that center ground to them, where I know there are some people in my threads who are not happy with Trump and his position, but really strong Republicans don't quite know how they're going to vote or whatever coming up into the election. But actually, if Trump had positioned himself very strongly in support of Ukraine and Mike Johnson would have gone with him on that, then I think they would have been far more successful, or they will have been far more successful in the November elections. I think that's actually a strategic misjudgment there, miscalculation from the Republicans, because they're going to, wherever Trump goes, he will take his supporters, the MAGA, with him. Doesn't matter what he says or where he positions himself, they will go, oh yeah, I know you said that before, but now I understand why you say that now. Oh, that's much better. Yeah. They'll just follow him. Who won't follow him are people who have a proper understanding of what's going on in the world, who are traditionally Republican, who are more towards the center ground, that realize that actually screwing over Ukraine is not cool. You go hard on that, you've attracted a lot of those Nikki Haley voters. I just think it's poor strategizing for the Republicans personally. I'm not just saying that because I'm pro-Ukrainian. I just think it seems fairly obvious to me. Right. Ukraine is pressing the US and Europe to step up F-16 pilot training. This is interesting. So the US has told the Ukrainian military that in addition to limited space, other countries are in line for F-16 training at the base and that it cannot break its commitments to those nations. Okay, fair enough. So Ukrainian officials are pressing the US and other countries to ramp up their F-16 pilot training, saying the current pipeline isn't producing enough aviators to fly the jets and that will soon be donated to Kyiv. Ukraine says that it's 30 pilots who are eligible to start training in the US immediately. It has 30. Yet the Biden administration has told Kyiv it lacks the school seats in the Arizona-based program to accept more than 12 pilot trainees at a time, according to 3 people with direct knowledge of the request. So that's actually, almost 3 times as many pilots could be trained as are presently going through these training schemes, particularly in Arizona. I can't speak for what's going on in Europe. 2 other facilities, as it says, Denmark and Romania have a similar issue with I can speak to that. A similar issue with available training spots. So that's all that. So Denmark, Romania, US, all not providing enough spaces for the number of pilots that could be going through the training there. And of course, you do have commitments. The US will have, and other nations will have commitments to training those who are scheduled for that training. Difficult one, but it would be great to see more pilots trained, obviously. Now, Estonia leads the charge on using frozen Russian assets. So what happened here? This is a Kyiv Independent article. We'll just dip into a few parts of it. Estonia's parliament enacted a law on May the 15th, so last month, enabling the use of frozen Russian assets to compensate Ukraine for damages caused by Russia's war. Kyiv and its Western allies have discussed using around $300 billion in Russian assets held in Western accounts to support Ukraine. As of October 2023, the Estonian government estimated having 38 million euros, or about $41.3 million in frozen Russian assets. Okay, first thing is, Estonia doesn't have that much in terms of frozen Russian assets that can be used to help Ukraine. But the point of this article and the point of what Estonia are doing, as they would argue, would be to, be the spearhead here, to be not only the cheerleaders, but the vanguard showing how this can be done. Follow our lead. Quote, we will adopt this law because Ukraine's victory is our victory, Hendrik Johannes Terras, the chairman of Estonia's Constitutional Commission, said. We are adopting this law because Russia must come out of the war defeated. Estonian President Ala Karis signed this into law in effect on May the 30th, adding that it will apply to those who have actively committed military aggression and violated the rules of war. According to the Ukraine support tracker, Estonia's aid commitments to Ukraine amount to 3.5% of GDP as of January the 15th, 2023. That's insane, isn't it? Positioning it as a leading contributor globally. Following Washington and Ottawa's footsteps, Tallinn opted to push the bar even further by targeting frozen Russian assets. So Estonia has frozen Russian assets estimated around, as mentioned, $41.3 million, primarily from oligarchs Andrei Melnichenko and Vyacheslav Kantor. The most valuable asset that may be confiscated is a liquid chemical and ammonia transshipment terminal linked to Melnichenko. It is a subsidiary of Eurochem, Russia's largest producer of mineral fertilizers and other chemicals. Meanwhile, Kantor owns the DBT dry bulk cargo terminal. Estonia does not possess significant sovereign assets of the Russian Federation, which globally account for around $300 billion. However, it does have frozen funds from Promsvyazbank and VTB Bank, which are both Russian owned. The adoption of this law aims to achieve more than transferring millions of frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. By making such decisive and morally necessary actions, Estonia shows its strong support for Ukraine and enhances its influence on global issues. This move is sets to a precedent, for other European Union countries to adopt similar mechanisms. Exactly what I was just saying. So that's really important and well done, Estonia. The Baltic nations really are just coming up trumps with regard to support for Ukraine. Now, French aid to Ukraine talks about European artillery ammunition production. By the end of 2024, the EU will have the capacity to produce more than 1.7 million large caliber artillery rounds, rising to more than 2 million in 2025. The aim is to reach 2.5 million again in 2025. So that's really good news. Europe really have ramped up production. It has been slower than people would have liked, but it's like moving a tanker. These things aren't easy to be done super quickly. And as Thierry Breton, he's a EU treasurer, points out, everything will still have to go to Ukraine. This isn't the responsibility of the EU Commission, but of the member states and industrialists. Being able to provide and giving are two different things. As a reminder, there are three mechanisms for supplying artillery shells to Ukraine. So the EPF, which is the European Peace Facility, that's kind of like the Ukraine support fund, if you like, which has delivered 150,000 shells. Bilateral donations, so individual countries giving Ukraine stuff rather than the EU as a whole, which can be discreet, as with the eastern countries threatened by Russia. And Ukrainian buying ammunition directly from the EU EDTIB. So that is EU's defence technological and industrial base. In other words, buying it from a network of EU companies, military industrial complex companies. For example, the purchase of 340,000 shells from Spain in 2023. That's not so much the EU giving stuff, although it might be like, we're going to give you cash, but you need to spend it with us. And then Ukraine goes, okay, we're going to spend that cash on 340,000 shells in Spain. And so it's two sides of a square. It's the same as the EU giving them those shells, right? It acts as, in a sense, that is inward investment. It's the EU saying to Spain, here's a bunch of money for your industry. And that's how the US is doing stuff as well, isn't it? That's how Presidential Drawdown Authority works. That's how USAI works. We're either going to draw down from our reserves and then replenish them, or we're just going to make orders from our military industrial complex. So that money that we say is going to Ukraine is actually just going to the US. We're spending money here, and then the tangible products are going to Ukraine. But the idea is that stimulates the economy. That's a collateral bonus for in that case, the US. Right, Rochelle, the Canadian producer of armoured vehicles, plans to open its plant in Ukraine. The company sells vehicles to clients around the world, including the Texas Police, US State Department, and Customs and Border Protection, and NASA. So they're doing quite well out of this war. They're strong supporters. Right, let's get this right, because I keep getting it wrong. The guy that runs that is of Israeli descent. I think his wife is Ukrainian, and they employ a bunch of Ukrainian refugees at Rochelle in Canada, and are like super supportive of Ukraine. They've given like 1,000 senators, or provided 1,000 senators plus to Ukraine. Anyway, first appearance of the Dutch Cheetah Spags, a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun. I talked about this in my last video, 60 of which were purchased from Jordan by the US for the Ukrainians. Now, this is the Cheetah is the upgraded Dutch version of the Gepard. Gepard itself as a word means cheetah, so it's kind of a bit weird there. But anyway, the cheetah version is a slightly upgraded radar that, as mentioned, 60 of them have been bought from Jordan. Now, I was talking about how the interception rates for Shahed drones at the moment is improving. It is really very good, almost 100% on many nights in the last month. I think they are getting more and more of these Gepards, as well as having other autocannons, the 23mm autocannon that you see often on the back of trucks and whatnot. You've got the Gepards and the Cheetahs. Then you've got Manpads, you've got Avengers, not little, you've got, say, 2 pods of 4 Stingers on the back of a Humvee. Then you've got Stormers, all sorts of different vehicles and weapons. with greater radar capabilities, not only with the vehicles themselves, so these had 25-kilometer radars on them, but also just standalone radars and everything. Each month, Ukraine, as I keep saying, is getting an upgraded military capability and capacity, and each month Russia's is downgrading, is being degraded. And with that comes a greater ability to network all these things together to provide a really improved air defense coverage. Now, the challenge remains with things like ballistic missiles. So surface-to-air missiles from the S-300s, S-400s, your Iskanders and your Kinjals, etc., etc. They are difficult to shoot down. You really need Patriots or SAMP-T. SAMP-T as well can do that. And that's why it's good news that they are getting more Patriots than SAMP-T, but possibly not enough. And that's going to be a challenge going forward, because those energy pieces of energy infrastructure and power plants are really vulnerable to those ballistic missiles. Right, the need for personnel for this year is 100,000 to 110,000. Says that, in my personal opinion, it will be possible to recruit up to 120,000 recruits this year, according to the Deputy Chairman of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Human Rights, Ruslan Horbenko. That is really good news if that is what they're able to recruit. If you think 120,000 divided by 12 months, that's 10,000 a month. So if that is over, if the Ukrainians are losing less than 10,000 a month, then that's a net gain. And that would be really high. Now, we talk about the Russians losing 30,000 a month. It's unknown what the Ukrainians are losing, but 10,000 a month would be a really heavy figure. So let's hope that this gives them ample replenishment and some for reserves, etc., etc. Sending French instructors to Ukraine is not a taboo issue, says Prime Minister of France, Attal. Quote, there is a simple way to end this war, and that is if Russia withdraws the troops it sent to Ukraine in February 2022, because it is the Russians who are responsible for the escalation, he emphasized. Attal, who raised the issue of France's support for Ukraine, said, quote, we are doing this because they are fighting for the values that we defend, freedom, democracy, values for which people who were not French, young people, came to fight for us, the French Prime Minister added. At least he added it probably a lot more fluidly than I did. Right, Viktor Orban has said that Hungary will not participate in NATO operations against Russia in Ukraine. I guess he's talking about if NATO were called to provide troops and weapons more formally to Ukraine, that Hungary won't take part. I mean, that's fairly obvious, but Hungary's continuing position in NATO and the EU surely has to be questioned more robustly. And I wonder, if he is given like proper indications that his or Hungary's position in both those organisations is on hanging by thread, I wonder whether that would force him to change course a little bit. I think we need to get just a little bit harsh with Hungary at the moment. Now, Putin has said an awful lot in a press conference with journalists. A number of things he said, let's go through them. It is fairly worrying. He said that, and the one that many people are talking about, is that he's considering supplying weapons to actors in other parts of the world that will strike countries that supply weapons to Ukraine. I don't know if that means someone like, I don't know, the Houthis or something like that he would provide them with weapons to strike at the military infrastructure or at countries, if you like, who are providing weapons to Ukraine. Now, of course, as I said earlier, Iran and North Korea are already providing weapons for Russia to fire into Ukraine. So what Ukraine is doing by using Western weapons into Russia is exactly what the Russians are themselves doing. So it is invalid that he uses this as an excuse to escalate in that manner. But of course, the other big problem, as mentioned earlier, is that Crimea and the Donbass and Zaporizhia and Kherson are supposedly, as according to Russia and their constitution, territories of Russia, and therefore the use of Western weapons into those territories is already a use of Western weapons into Russia. So it makes no sense what he's doing. But he needs to be seen to do something, I guess. Putin also said that the Russian Federation will improve its air defense systems in response to the supply of high-precision weapons in Ukraine. I mean, good luck with that. He said that everyone accuses Russia of making nuclear threats, but Russian tactical nuclear weapons have a yield of 70 to 75 kilotons. Do not provoke us to make nuclear threats. So it's your fault that we're making nuclear threats. The West believes Russia will never use nuclear bombs. If some actions will threaten our sovereignty or territorial integrity, we could use any measures we have. So, yeah, everyone says we keep making threats, but here's a threat. He also said they are stealing more in the US Army than we do in the Russian Army. So, corruption projection there, just absolute nonsense. The US is spending huge money to uphold its status of empire. Translated is, the US does spend a huge amount of money, and it does every year, on its defense, which helps to further its own strategic intentions and objectives, however you interpret that. Russia has no imperial ambitions. Of course, that's complete BS. I mean, you only have to read his essay from before the war and understand that he wants to be a new Peter the Great to understand that it's exactly what his ambitions are. He also says that Russia is not going to attack NATO and calls stupid like this table those who are claiming otherwise. You are stupid like this table if you think that we're going to attack NATO. Now, he should understand that if he attacked NATO, he'd be absolutely hammered straight away. So it doesn't surprise me that he says we're not going to attack NATO. He made lots of claims about the Ukrainian armed forces losing 5 times as many as the Russians. He said the Ukrainians are losing 50,000 a month, and he said, which means that the Russians must be losing 10,000 a month at the very least in order for his other claims to be correct. And that's interesting because that is an admission that the Russians are losing far more significant numbers of troops than he previously had admitted. So even with that very pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine positioning and those statistics, yeah, it doesn't look great. And all the other all the other figures he claimed were, I think, fairly dubious. Anyway, that's Putin saying Putin-y things, but actually this is the most explicit he's been on the war, possibly since the war began. And this is really interesting that he has come out and said all this stuff, because usually he shirks away from making like direct claims about the war. We haven't had claims about losses since, goodness me, the last official ones were like they've lost 6,000 and something, and they made that still in 2022, and we haven't heard anything since then. So yeah, they don't often make claims, so that is, I think, quite remarkable. Anyway, let me know what you think about all these matters. Please check out my chat, or at least send an email if you're interested and you can make it to Andover. It'll be great to have as many people there as possible to help support that noble cause. It'll be really great to see you all. Anyway, take care. Speak to you soon.